Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Twisted Tales. Today's episode, going to talk about Robert Willie Pickton. Date of birth, October 26, 1949. He had roughly 6 to 49 victims in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. A former pig farmer and serial killer. So, he mostly preyed on women, drug users, prostitutes, around Vancouver's downtown East Side district. And you always hear people say, it's the quiet ones that you have to look out for. And most serial killers are pretty quiet. They're well behaved, and usually the ones that we least suspect. But a lot of them could put on fronts, charm their way out of shit, keep a low radar, just to mask their own ulterior motives. All their dark sides, all that shit, right? So, let's try to get into this one. Now, I'm sure that the whole town and the authorities, they'd be the last to suspect old Willie here. Just a complete madman in general, right? But here we are. So we have a quiet man who had a dark, deep, twisted secret. Went on undetected in a serial killer killing spree for years. So, just living his everyday life, butchering women in his downtime. No, even our good friend Pickton. His name was Robert Pickton. I mean, he's gonna accumulate nicknames over the years too, right? The pig farmer, the pig-headed killer, and pork chop Rob. That's actually pretty hilarious. All serial killers actually need a background, right? So, here we go. Robert Pickton, born October 24th, 1949, in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. He had one brother named David Francis Pickton. Linda Louise, that was his sister. His parents, Leonard Pickton, and his mother, Helen Louise Pickton. So, she was born March 20th, 1912, passed away 1979. Pickton's father, July 19th, 1896 to 1977. Pickton owned the farm with his brother David. So the farm is located roughly 27 kilometers away from Vancouver, so just a little ways out of town. Or for my American friends, it's 17 miles out of town. So Pickton, his brother, and his sister, they had inherited the farm in the 70s after the parents died. His sister Linda was actually sent to live with relatives in Vancouver, as the Pickton parents thought that the pig farm was actually an inappropriate setting to raise a lady. Pickton owned the farm with his brother David. So the farm is located roughly 27 kilometers away from Vancouver, so just a little ways out of town. Or for my American friends, it's 17 miles out of town. So Pickton, his brother, and his sister, they had inherited the farm in the 70s after the parents died. His sister Linda was actually sent to live with relatives in Vancouver, as the Pickton parents thought that the pig farm was actually an inappropriate setting to raise a lady. One of Pickton's workers, Bill Hickok, he actually called the farm a creepy-looking place. A little run down in parts, shit like that, right? So the worker Bill also noted that on the premises that he worked on, it was actually patrolled by a 600-pound boar, or roughly 270 kilograms. It was one of the very few pigs on the farm that he said he never ever saw a pig like that in his life, stating that, he would chase and bite you. The pig even ran around with the dogs, patrolling the farm lot. And he described Pickton as a very quiet guy, a little hard to strike up a conversation with, teeny tiny bit of bizarre behavior, but nothing really out of the ordinary. Now, Bill Hickok, just keep that name in mind for a little later on in the episode. even in like the early days of Pickton and his younger brother David, they just worked backbreaking hours at the farm because their mother prioritized the pigs and the livestock over the cleanliness of her own two sons. She sent them to school in like unwashed, dirty clothes. They reeked of manure. Like in turn, this actually gave the two young lads the nickname Stinky Piggy from their classmates. And at one point, Pickton was actually scared of showers, so he took baths. So that didn't really help much, considering he only did it like once or twice a week. But Pickton was actually strongly attached to his mother. He did everything that she could have asked, and he had little interaction with his abusive father, Leonard. Roughly around the age of 12, pig farming actually taking up most of Pickton's time. He began to struggle in school, and he eventually failed the second grade. But over time, he just kept going, kept doing his thing. And Pickton had one time, he'd grown accustomed to a calf that he bought. And eventually 2 weeks later, he got home from school, wanted to see his calf, because he wanted to keep that thing forever. And his parents actually told him, hey, go check the barn, because he couldn't find his beloved cow anywhere. So when he entered the barn, he found the calf slaughtered and hung. It was not sure the parents did that for punishment for failing the second grade and not applying himself in school, but all in all, it's pretty much just like a terrible thing to just spring on a child of that age. So I guarantee that definitely played a role on his mental health. Pickton's failing grades eventually landed him in a special class. He just needed to bring his marks up. So in 63 or 64, he ended up dropping out of school to begin working as a meat cutter at a butcher shop. So he did this for roughly about 7 years before he ended up working full-time at the family pig farm. And as I mentioned before, the pig farm was also a salvage yard, filled with junk, old cars, trucks, machinery, huge piles of dirt that they sold off. It was just kind of an interest to both the Pickton brothers. So one ran the dirt business, and among most of their interests, they actually had workshops, sheds. Most of these were in dire need of repair, though, because many were falling apart from being unkept. And there's like a little shanty house that had a pig pen in it. That fucker completely crumbled to the ground. So this left Pickton to keep all his piglets that he bought from auctions in a small horse trailer. It wasn't even a sufficient amount, that wouldn't be the sufficient amount for the amount of pigs that he bought. So he just kept them in there until he got around to slaughtering them. Even though the Picktons had a bit of money, from the salvage shit, the old junk fucking cars, dirt piles, real estate developers eventually got a hold of them because their land was so massive that they wanted to buy parts of their land. So they had money, and they could have easily fixed up their rundown farm, kept it in good repair, but they disregarded to do that. Maybe it's just how they were brought up, they didn't really mind like a bit of mess. And the pig farm itself in this tale does play a good factor, but it wasn't actually the family's original farm. The Pickton parents, Louise and Leonard, had actually inherited a family homestead a few kilometers away west on the other side of town in the larger part of the community of Coquitlam. So they named that property the L.F. Pickton Ranch, Poultry and Pigs. The address was 2426 Pitt River Road. Eventually changed it to 2426 Cape Horn. Everybody knows the Pickton family was a little messed up. But Pickton's father, he actually wasn't too keen on raising the two boys and the sister, which is why they sent the sister off. But looking after the kids mostly fell on the mother, Louise. So she was a workaholic woman. Pretty tough, yet eccentric at times. Even having Robert smell like pig shit, and his mom insisted that they only take baths. Mind you, this wasn't very often either, like I said previously. In turn, this made Pickton afraid of taking showers. So, he never wore any clean clothing, which made him pretty unpopular with the ladies. And humming like pig shit definitely didn't help. Dead animals, dirt, whatever else was going on at the farm, right? But I'm going to touch base on Pickton's family here. Because they all know, like I said, he wasn't the only messed up one in that family. October 16th, 1967. His brother Dave was actually driving his father's red pickup. So a short time after passing and getting his license at 16 years old, just like any young kid, right, at that age, and he headed east along Dominion Avenue, so towards Burns Road. He had a buddy in school, 14-year-old boy named Tim Barrett, and Tim was walking down the road. Along the way, poor little Tim was ran over by David. His body was mangled. He was hurt really bad to the point of being seriously wounded. So, the poor kid sustained a fractured skull with a subcranial hemorrhage. His pelvis was fractured and dislocated. And David just left and he went to the Pickton residence, told his mother Louise what happened, and eventually David and his mom returned to the scene. Pretty lightning fast, I guess, and they found Tim alive, still breathing. Finding Tim still alive, Louise assumed that Tim's injuries were going to be fatal, so she thought nothing more could be done about the situation, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. She pushed Tim over, rolled him across the road, and then finally down an embankment into a slough along the ditch, and she pretty much left the kid to drown. I mean, shortly after the accident, David kind of panicked due to the damage done to the truck. I mean, it was his carelessness that brought all this shit on. So he brought the truck into a mechanic, and the mechanic actually worked on, like, the family's vehicles. So he knew about the family. And he had the dent banged out of the front of the hood, he had a broken turn signal replaced, and he actually wanted the scratches and the marks on the front of the truck painted. So the paint that he originally wanted to use was the same paint that they used on the farm. Red paint used for the house and the barns. And the mechanic actually declined to do that work. He didn't want to repaint the vehicle. So the vehicle accident happened around 7:40 p.m. And Tim parents, Philip and Louise Barrett, they began to panic a little bit, wonder where their son was. Hey, like, when's my little guy going to be home, right? So they started phoning neighbors, and they eventually went out to look for him, just a little bit, Around 1 a.m., they called it off, and Philip headed to the local police department to report his son missing. Early the next morning, a neighbor of Philip, a woman whose son seen Tim the night before, they joined in on the search, and eventually Philip found one of his son's shoes on the side of the road. So he looked around the spot, pretty much where he'd been hit by the fucking truck, and they continued around the area until they reached the slough. So the slough ran about 10 feet from the ground, and they looked in the water, and they spotted Tim's body floating below. The police were notified immediately, and they showed up super quick. So they pulled the body from the water, and an autopsy was done. So they showed the cause of death to be from drowning, and not from the injuries the kid suffered when he was hit by the truck. One of the pathologists who ran the autopsy stated that the truck injuries would definitely not have killed him. So, if that poor little kid would have got some help, he'd still be alive today. I mean, shit, he was only in grade 8. He was born February 13th, 1953. And the Barretts buried their son October 20th, 1967. Like, nobody should have ever had to bury their kid, Just, people are horrible. Now, a little after the whole incident, in March 1968, a coroner's jury decided to actually have a listen to the evidence of several people. The neighbors, the mechanic who fixed the truck, police that investigated the case. Even though the verdict ended up being ruled as an accidental death, the coroner told everybody that a criminal investigation was about to be launched underway. So the current ongoing investigation had dived into David's actions the night of the incident. So this fucker didn't get off scot-free at all. Didn't, pretty much necessarily got a slap on the wrist too, but he ended up being sent to a juvenile court over the matter. Since the coroner's request wasn't mandated to investigate the mishappenings of that night, pretty much nothing else was done for it. Like, Mrs. Louise Pickton was never charged, or their fucking actions either. Although, the story quickly ran rampant throughout the town, so it kind of tarnished their already shitty reputation a bit. So, good for them. And that's all I have on Pickton on the early days for now. So now I'm going to delve into the downtown east side. We'll go with that. Now, let's dive into the downtown east side. So, downtown east side, it's in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Has a high crime rate. Pretty much just like a rough part of town. Given the nickname Skid Row of Canada. So think on that. Usually the 100 block of East Hastings Street, this is one of the city's oldest neighborhoods. There's a lot of drug use, homelessness, crime, poverty, shitload of sex workers, and a shit ton of mental illness. All this stuff runs rampant through the streets, right? So let's just say all this was right up Robert Pickton's alley. This town was pretty much perfect for him. He cruised the city, meeting ladies of the night. He offered them drugs, money, most times just picking them up and then driving them back to his pig farm in Port Coquitlam. He often shared the place with his brother Dave, so with a good certainty that these women's disappearance would go unnoticed by police for a little bit. Even local police who patrolled the area, they've been accused of not paying attention to the number of women that went missing. I mean, that downtown area is pretty big, so some say most of all that shit was ignored due to the lifestyles of the women. An inquiry from the government found that the handling of the Pickton case found lots of blatant failures by authorities, stating that it was mostly, they didn't say stuff because most of them were prejudiced against sex workers and indigenous people. All this was swept up into a tragedy of epic proportions. Most of these crimes spanned from 1978 to 2001, and even using the same red pickup from the family farm to pick up the unsuspecting victims, he was able to pick up victims unnoticed due to little police presence in the area. Often enough, it took police years to figure out the trend of prostitutes that were quickly vanishing off the streets. Fucking years. I get they were busy, but, they can't look into stuff a little bit more. I mean, it took them a while to investigate each missing person's report. Just kind of what I'm trying to say. I mean, even though all of them were roughly being in the same age range, they began to notice, a pattern, finally, in all the disappearances. It was a low-track area, though. So, I mean, as most women kept disappearing from that area, the police decided to make a list. So that was up to about 54 missing women from the low-track area from 1983 to about 2001. And roughly 85 to 100 investigators worked on this case, here and there, each helping with what they could. They didn't have much forensic evidence to go ahead with, and most people did not like the police investigating in that area, so they're definitely a little bit uncooperative with police. Down the line, police tried to piece together pretty much when the girls went missing, when they were last seen, and when they were reported missing. So roughly around June 1999, police started interviewing relatives of the missing prostitutes, just to try and piece together and connect, DNA between all the victims. So they searched cemeteries, local mental health facilities, and searched to see if these women might still be alive. Even though this investigation period was going on, 4 more women went missing from the downtown east side. Authorities found out that roughly 5 out of the 50-ish missing persons had left for either a better life, some died from overdoses, illnesses, some without identification, and who later had been identified. So there was a huge pool of suspects due to the lifestyle of these women, including drug dealers, pimps, etc. It took some time, but they had to eliminate them all one by one. And some suspects were charged with other crimes while they were being investigated. Example, sex trafficking, drug dealing, beating up sex workers. So this tied up the investigation a little bit, because they were trying to find information on one crime, and then finding other crimes that these guys were fucking capable of. So, because they had to deal with all this shit, they couldn't progress on the case that was directly in front of them. hitting dead end after dead end, and roughly up until 1988, when they got a major lead in the case. Remember when I said to remember the name Bill Hickok? So, yeah, he was a 37-year-old, and he had drug and alcohol abuse. Until one of his foster sisters actually got him a job at the salvage company. And we all know who owned that fucking company. Robert fucking Pickton. Just like kind of funny story. Like the new hire being Bill Hickok. His foster sister, that was actually Robert Pickton's on again, off again girlfriend. And roughly about the time of 1997, when he went to collect his paychecks, he grabbed them from either Robert himself or Pickton's brother, David. And at the pig farm, like I said previously, this place made Bill feel very uncomfortable to visit. Like he knew about the lavish parties that they'd thrown at the farm. I'll touch base on that, and it pretty much had like high clientele, even though the place was a goddamn disaster. It was littered with sex workers, because they were like the main attraction, right? So Hickok remembered reading an article in the local newspaper about police investigating the missing sex workers. So it wasn't hard to put two and two together by police authorities. Now, the parties, Pickton had actually converted a building near his farm. He turned that into a huge party palace, and he hosted wild get-togethers, highly illegal parties for him and his friends. So he named the building Piggy Palace, and he used this as a place to throw gatherings where drugs and booze would fuel, eventful evenings. He went as far as to have parties attending as many as like 1,700 guests at a time, eventually gaining so much popularity that he set up a non-profit charity. He called this the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. So, that's pretty brazen, right? Let's take a look at that for one sec. He definitely knew what he was doing with that. Kind of like an inside joke, maybe? And all the partygoers were none the wiser to his dark antics, which is probably why no one suspected this fun partygoer to turn into a fucking serial killer. And, even soon after the Piggy Palace opened, the Pickton brothers went to court after being sued for using the premises as a party spot, instead of originally using it for agricultural purposes. And, because that's what everything was zoned for, right? And when Bill, he sat down with police, and he advised them of the feeling of dread that he had walking on the farm. What kind of shit the Pickton brothers were actually into. So, police decided to listen, for once, and follow up on this lead. And, because they also felt some shady shit went down regarding the farm. They knew what David from, a 1992 sexual assault, where he attacked a woman in his trailer, but the woman escaped. So when they talked to Bill, and he ended up spilling, the proverbial beans here, to the authorities about Pickton, he told them that Pickton he circles the downtown area, and he looks for prostitutes, and he takes them back to his farm. So Bill noted that there was actually also a bunch of purses that he found with identification of just random girls throughout the farm. Not in just one particular place, right? But, yeah, it's not a good thing to find, right? And then you start suspecting things, so. Well, folks, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I still got another couple things to work on for it, so thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys listening. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.
Twisted Tales.